Yeah, hello everyone, Marvin Reacts here and welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be reacting to Day in the Life of Joseph Stalin, or Stalin if you want to keep it simple and short. Stay hydrated everyone. And so yeah, if you watch the news lately, you most probably know about the Russo-Ukrainian war. And yeah, it's a pretty big event. Even though I live in the Philippines, which is far away from the events of the war, it's still pretty huge. Everything that happens in this world could affect another. Let's say, for example, the Great Depression. It affected the entire world. First, it started off with one country, then the entire world. Then the Spanish flu. It started off in just one country, then before you know it, the whole world got infected. COVID-19, it started off in China, then before you knew it, the whole world got infected. Anything that happens in the world, even though it's far away, it could affect the world itself. And so, while I was watching the news of the Russo-Ukrainian war, I thought, why not, how about some Russian history, since I couldn't find any Ukrainian history videos that are less than, 10 or 20 minutes. So yeah, let's get to it, shall we? Like and... Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
A day in the life of Stalin. Joseph Stalin, originally Ios Vissariones Dzhugashvili, was born.
Yeah, fun fact, Joseph Stalin wasn't actually Russian. He's from Georgia. And no, not the Georgia in the US, but the Georgia in Eurasia or Europe. I don't know. But yeah, it's not in the US. And like the narrator of this video said, his real name isn't actually Joseph Stalin. It's whatever he just said.
Joseph Stalin, originally Ios Vissariones Dzhugashvili, was
Ios Dzhugashvili. Hey, I got it on the first try, or maybe not. Comment down below if you're listening and as to whether I got it right on the first time.
Was born in the small Georgian town of Gori in December of 1878. He grew up poor but excelled at school. After a brief stint in a seminary, Joseph became interested in socialist politics, inspired by the writings of Karl Marx. By 1912, Vladimir Lenin, who he had first met in 1905 at a Bolshevik conference in Tammerfors, Finland, had made him a member of the Bolshevik Central Committee. This paved the way for him to play a key role in the Bolshevik uprising of 1917, which brought about the demise of the Tsarist Russia and ultimately led to the establishment of the USSR in 1922. After the death of Lenin in 1924 and the ensuing power struggle, it was Stalin who emerged victorious, ruling the USSR with an iron fist until his death in 1953.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know how Stalin came to power, but if for those who do already know, just bear with it. So how Stalin came to power was, well, he got when the Communist Party came to power, he was given the position of secretary, even though that's not what he wanted. But it was a powerful position. Because for those who don't know, as secretary, he had the power to give people jobs within the party. So he gave jobs to his friends and people who would give him their support and influence. And the more friends he got, the more jobs he gave. The more jobs he gave, the more friends and allies he got. And soon enough, when Lenin was about to die, Stalin was already too powerful for the party to remove him. And yeah, that's how he came to power.
It's believed that Stalin was responsible for the deaths of at least 6 million people, while some scholars have argued that the figure was closer to 20 million. Stalin is therefore considered to have been one of the most ruthless and notorious dictators of the 20th century. Despite the brutality of his regime,
Yeah, depending on how you look at it. If you count the people who died of starvation as uh, being killed by Stalin directly, even though it's more like indirectly killing them, then you could say he's killed more, at least over 6 million. But then again, it's hard to tell.
And the violence often shown towards those who lived under its authority, Stalin was a crucial ally in the fight against Nazi Germany. Without the Soviet Union's role in World War II, it's very likely that the Allies would have failed in their attempt to liberate Europe from the
True, 100% true.
Axis powers.
Mag-shopping na tayo. First mega sale na.
At the outbreak of the so-called Great Patriotic War, Stalin increased his workday significantly. According to Field Marshal Georgy Zhukov, Stalin worked as many as 15 hours a day and took no less than 5 leading positions upon himself. These responsible roles included Supreme Commander, General Secretary of the Central Committee of the All-Union Communist.
Yeah, I know that he had those positions on him, but I wonder what the other 3 are, because I actually don't know what the other 3 positions are.
Communist Party, Chairman of the Council of People's Commissars of the Soviet Union, Head of the State Defense Committee, and People's Commissar of Defense. Aware of the mounting stress on the Supreme Commander, Zhukov was cleverly able to gauge Stalin's mood. When drawing deeply on his pipe, it meant he was in a good mood. If, however, Stalin failed to light his pipe once it was out of tobacco, it was a sign of impending anger.
Oh yeah, and Stalin loved his pipe. In fact, many people who had pipes back in the day loved their pipes. Because you know how back then smoking was more acceptable, and yeah. Jeez. I'm amazed by the fact that humanity most of Europe's population didn't go down just because of cancer. Jeez.
This understanding allowed Zhukov to deal with Stalin in a way that the other generals couldn't. It's believed that Stalin suffered from insomnia and was not an early riser. He often slept in his clothes, on a military-style camp bed in his personal residence, the Kunstvodacha. Failing any earlier emergencies that required his immediate attention, he usually rose at about 11 a.m. to receive the first reports on how the war was progressing. Stalin would have a light breakfast before spending several hours working, which involved taking reports, issuing orders, and conducting meetings either at his home in Kunstvo or at the Kremlin. Twice a day at noon and 9 p.m., he received updates from his Stavka plenipotentiaries, men who were directly overseeing the war effort. Failure to submit these reports was met by a harsh rebuke from the supreme leader, often in the form of threats against their position within the government and even against their lives. In the early hours of the evening, Stalin would head to his office, known to the regime insiders as the Little Corner, which was on the second floor of the Kremlin. From here, he would run sessions of the GKO, the Soviet State Defense Committee, which can be best compared to a war cabinet. These sessions would go on for many hours, sometimes not ending until well into the night. This was a particularly tense time of day for Stalin's underlings, both military and civilian. The dictator's paranoia became increasingly worse throughout his reign, and entry to the Little Corner was tightly controlled. No weapons were permitted, and everyone, no matter their rank, had to carry their identification papers. Visitors were encouraged to never disagree with Stalin, not to engage in small talk, and to leave his presence quickly once they had finished giving their report. The threat of arrest was ever present. At the end of Stalin's heavy workday, he would frequently invite other high-ranking members of the regime to join him for dinner at Kunstvo, often to be followed by a movie.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Stalin loved movie night. He especially liked detective movies and action movies.
Were not the kind of invitations that could be turned down. After his men were finally allowed to return to their homes for a few hours of much-needed rest, Stalin would end the day reading books before finally going to sleep in the early hours of the morning. Whilst Stalin had the luxury of not having to rise until late into the day, many members of the regime were not so fortunate and had to be ready for work in the early hours in order to ensure that the state ran smoothly. Stalin's control over the lives of those who worked for him, including his generals, was so pervasive that many of them were even given set sleep times. Alexander Vasilevsky, chief of the General Staff of the Soviet Armed Forces and Deputy Minister of Defense, for example, was told that he had to be asleep between the hours of 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Stalin would personally phone him during these times to ensure that his orders were being followed. Such was the extent of Vasilevsky.
I actually have a family member who used to do that. I'm not going to mention their name, but I will mention that she is a woman. And she, one day she called me, and when I tried to ask what she wanted, I didn't get a reply, so I hanged up. Then she called me again, but still I didn't hear her voice. And again, it repeated for like a few times until finally I could hear her voice. It was so annoying and frustrating.
His workload, though, that he was forced to order his staff to lie to Stalin and say that he was resting when he was in fact trying to sneak in a few extra hours of work. In the early years of the war, while there was still a serious threat of defeat by the Germans, Stalin was not a heavy drinker. He also strongly encouraged sobriety in those who worked for him.
Oh, I actually didn't know about that. Interesting.
From 1943 onward, though, this began to change, and Stalin's near-nightly dinners became increasingly drunken events, especially for his men. These affairs usually began late in the afternoon, when Stalin's magnates would receive invitations to join him for dinner. As before, these were not the sort of invitations that could be declined. Over the course of the next 6 hours or so, Stalin's associates were encouraged to drink to excess. Stalin joined in the drinking, although his drinks were often watered down on medical advice. These were not fun social events for the Soviet officials. A single mistaken word could place either themselves or their families in danger. In fact, the statesman Anastas Mikoyan claimed that Stalin forced us to drink to loosen our tongues. The situation became so dire that some of the men were prepared to risk Stalin's anger and attempt to maintain some degree of sobriety through tactics such as sneaking out of the room for naps or having waitresses pour them colored water instead of wine. It was in this atmosphere that a great deal of Soviet state business was done. Throughout the evening, Stalin would continue to issue orders, receive messages, and even approve executions if necessary. According to Field Marshal Zhukov, many decisions relating to the armed forces and the security of the Soviet Union were regulated in these unofficial meetings, as the contingent of the gatherings largely consisted of the USSR's highest-ranking officials. Late into the night, usually around 2 a.m., Stalin would suggest watching a movie, sometimes more than one. He is known to have favored westerns, detective films, and gangster movies. After this, he would sometimes suggest another bite to eat, meaning that his poor, exhausted, and now hungover officials often didn't get home until well past daybreak.
Oh, these poor lads. They're over here just like, when can we go home? We have to go to work in a few hours. Oh, a few hours and with little sleep. Can you just get like a hobby, Stalin? We got work to do. How many times are we going to watch Sherlock Holmes 1 and Sherlock Holmes 2 Games of Shadows? We already know what happens in Sherlock Holmes 1. I forgot the protagonist, the villain's name, but yeah, we know he gets hanged on the London Bridge. Correction Tower Bridge. And we know what happens in Game of Shadows. Moriarty falls off a cliff and dies. So yeah, come on Stalin, just get a hobby.
As in earlier years, Stalin would end his day reading books before finally falling asleep. This state of affairs continued until March 1st, 1953, when Stalin suffered a massive stroke. He lingered on for several
They even added the fact that he peed himself. That Stalin pissed himself when he had a stroke. Ah, that's hilarious.
days before ultimately passing away on the evening of the 5th. Following the appropriate preparation, his body was then displayed in the famous Hall of Columns for mourners throughout the Soviet Union to visit.
Okay, so that's the end of it. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. There were a few things there were a lot of things that I didn't really know, like what was Stalin's real name, because I actually didn't know what's his real name. All I did know that his Joseph Stalin wasn't actually his name. So yeah, this was really interesting to me. Shoutouts to Simple History, they make great content. Check out check them out. And so that's all I have to say really. If you like this video, please hit that like and subscribe like I did with this video. Check out my Facebook page, link is in the description, as well as the link to this video by Simple History. And yeah, that's all for tonight. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!